Okay guys, welcome back to Camera Talk. Okay, so how to nail focus without a focus puller. So essentially a focus puller, as far as I understand, is just a dude whose job is to pull the focus of the camera with his little wireless scroll wheel thing, whatever, attached to the monitor that's getting the feed from the camera, and then he's just kind of pulling the focus, so then that scroll wheel info is going to the little, gear on the lens of the camera. While the camera guy's doing his thing, the focus puller is pulling the focus to make sure that things are in focus the way that people want them to be, etc., etc. But anyway, how to nail focus without somebody who's doing that. So essentially, if you're not using autofocus, so does your camera have focus peaking, right? So focus peaking, as far as I understand, is just like when your camera basically will on screen display, like, I think depending on the camera settings, you might be able to choose the color of the pixels that do this. But like I have it set on here as red. So essentially the focus peaking is like whatever part of the image is in focus or more in focus or whatever, it'll have like these little red pixels appear around kind of the edges or the details of that object, right, in the camera view. So, and this doesn't show up on the internal recording in the camera. The only way that you would get that to show up is if you were recording via like HDMI from the camera and you were exporting all of the overlays, then you could see it. But when you're recording internally on your camera, you're probably, I don't think there's a way that you would ever be able to see the focus peaking pixels, so don't worry about it showing up in your actual final product if you're recording on your camera. It's just like a tool to help you to keep your shot or to focus your shot. And so, like, if you're doing like a sit-down interview, and you have your camera pointed at somebody, just like, if you have focus peaking, turn that on and just like dial in the focus manually on your lens to get like the red pixels around their head or whatever the focus peaking pixels color are. Get that like dialed in where you get like the most of the focus peaking pixels as possible around the person's face, so that it's like as in focus as possible, and then press record. Right? There's times where maybe you're going to be more doing the focus peaking, the focus pulling on the fly, but that's going to be probably if you're like moving around, doing stuff, things like that. But if you're doing anything that's kind of stationary, for the most part, it's probably going to be better if you do that before you start filming. You could do it after and like cut it out later, but like if you want to kind of minimize the editing requirements or whatever, it's like this is kind of like minor stuff. But anyway, so beyond that, if your camera doesn't have focus peaking, does it have some sort of video out? So HDMI, mini, micro, full-size HDMI, does it have SDI? Just some sort of cable that will take the video image from your camera and bring it to a camera monitor. What's a camera monitor? It's like a little screen that's made usually for cameras, and it has certain features. Depending on the camera monitor, it might have different levels of features, but essentially like one of the common ones is focus peaking. So if you don't have focus peaking on your camera, don't worry, it might not be game over. If you could get a video feed coming out of the camera into the camera monitor, you could do the focusing on the camera, and then the camera monitor will give you the focus peaking information pixel stuff, and then you could just gauge it that way, and probably the monitor will give you better quality focus peaking than most camera screens will. So that's another thing to consider, and also it's a bigger image, so you might be able to see the detail better, stuff like that, depending on the camera size, or the size of the camera screen versus the size of the monitor screen, etc. You could do LiDAR. So LiDAR autofocus system would be like you would put focus gears on your camera focus ring. If it doesn't already have it, focus gears is just kind of like, it looks like a little gear sprocket, but it's on your lens, and then you'd have like a little, like a smaller focus gear thing that would go onto that focus gear on the lens. So you basically have two little gears. One gear's on the lens, one little gear is beside the lens. And it's this little electronic thing that basically moves the lens, right? Then that little thing goes to the LiDAR unit, which is like this little almost kind of secondary camera that's on the camera. And it, as far as I understand, LiDAR sends out little light pings and judges like three-dimensional space based on that information. I could be explaining this wrong, so feel free to look up what LiDAR is. But essentially, yeah, you could do it that way. It's going to be a bit more expensive than just manually pulling focus yourself, or using some sort of manual focus pulling gear where you're actually just twisting it with your hand. This LiDAR thing is more of an automatic thing, so it's kind of gonna do it sort of like an autofocus system would, although it might not have the same ability to like track the face of a person or something like that. It might just go to whatever's closest to it. But I don't know all LiDAR systems. Maybe there's something, there might be different systems that have different levels of abilities. But anyway, moving on, that's going to be more expensive, so consider what your budget is, you know. So you could do LiDAR. And I think you could even build your own LiDAR system, but is that something that you want to do? Maybe it's a clunky thing to do. Like, do you want to do that? So consider all these different things. But anyway, I'm going to end that there. Maybe some of this was helpful. Anyway, but I have a Skool Community. If you have questions, feel free to click the link in the description and join the Skool Community, and you could ask questions there if you got questions. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.